Welcome to another Black History Month live interview with who will always get the invite from me, the famous, the amazing. I mean, have you heard this man sing? Okay, this man can sing. Reverend Dr. Jamie Washington, how are you?
I am so great to be with my family, my friend, doing good work. Yes. It's doing good work. Awareness, authenticity, positivity, inclusivity. I love it, every bit of it. And I'm also wearing my shirt today from my other bestie colleague is Do Better.
Yes.
Right? Do better consciously, do better mindfully, do better intentionally, Dr. Deborah Griffith. So I love this whole notion of do. Right? Don't just talk about it, be about it, right? So doing good work, doing better, consciously, intentionally. And so as we are in this space of pausing to honor, and celebrate, and to reflect on the contributions of our ancestors as folks of African descent, let's do good work and do better, right? And get into good trouble and all that stuff.
Let's open that up a little bit more. Let's open this doing, because I think a lot of folks are, when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion work, everybody wants to do. Everybody wants to be in the doing. And I oftentimes think it's we need to slow up. There's a step before the doing. And so what would you identify as, before you start jumping into action? What should folks be, where should folks be framing their doing?
Well, what I appreciate about that question is we have to reframe doing, right? Because when we only think of doing as product and not doing as process, right, we miss it, right? And so in doing, and I was doing some work yesterday with a diversity council that's just getting started. And they've got a charge, right? They're there to produce product, these things. But the leadership of that group was really clear that in order to do that, we have to first do us. We have to do our work, right? And using a framework from ACE and USC's Racial Equity, Racial Diversity Network. And that framework is so powerful. It is strategic diversity leadership, or strategic equity leadership. And it offers three particular things. And it is personal consciousness raising, doing that work. You got to do you. You got to find out who you are. You got to understand how you're showing up in that. The next piece is values, right? So what's the values that's informing your doing, and then practice, right? And so that offers us the work before we get into the strategic plan and the putting this program or counting that metrics and putting that stuff into place. You've got to do you, right? Who am I as a racialized being? Who am I as a gendered being, as a class being? How does that show up? How does that inform my worldview? How does that inform my lens, right? What are the values by which I operate, right? And so how do I center love and care, and center humility and vulnerability, and a willingness to be uncomfortable and navigate within discomfort? How do I center the importance of reimagining as a value, and not just, well, we don't know how to do that, or we've never done that before? To dismantle, to eradicate systemic oppression, we have to imagine often something we've not ever seen, right? So those are core pieces.
The reimagining. Yes.
Right. So I appreciated you asking the question, because even as this shirt and doing good work and being in Black History Month, and so what y'all gonna do? Start with doing you, right? I often say when I'm doing DEI work, I will say to folks, you can't do this work well if you won't do race. And because often, in the context of the US in particular, because of the hurt and pain, folks often will run to their minoritized identities, particularly if they're not BIPOC or Native or Indigenous or multiracial. And so you'll find folks running to class, running to sexual orientation, running to gender. And I don't mean running in a negative way. I mean that they just say, well, what about? They go to those spaces. And so I remind folks that all of that matters. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. There's no hierarchy of oppression. And in the context, particularly of the US and particularly this moment, if you're doing DEI work, you must do race. You must do race. And so then the next question, Dara, is what would I be doing if I were doing race?
What am I doing? Who am I talking to?
That's right. That's right.
Use as a
what do I know? What do I notice? What don't I notice? What do I address? What do I respond to? What don't I respond to? You know, just all of those things. And so when I'm in a room and I say, so how many folks you get that we must do race? And 99% of the time after I've kind of framed that, folks will say, I agree with Jamie. We must do race. And then I say, so when you leave here today, what will you be doing if you're doing race? And I invite people into a conversation around that. And all of our friends who are listening now, if I were to ask you, what does it mean to do race? What would you be doing if you were doing race? And how does that start with you doing you? Yep. And how you've been racialized and the racialized impact and the conscious and the unconscious and the implicit bias and the microaggressions and all of the things, the internalized oppression, the internalized dominance that shows up in you. Yep. So that you can catch it, name it, engage it, and so on and so forth.
That when you say the first piece of doing you, I think it's sometimes all that stuff goes over people's head. They don't really fully know what that means. And say, do you in diversity, equity, inclusion work? And what I hear you saying is really like, where did your biases lie, right? Because you have them, we all do. And then what is the work that you have done or none of the work that you have done?
That's right.
To acknowledge maybe the harm or the reinforcing of oppression.
That's right. The complicitness. That's right. The complicity. Yeah.
Right. Like that's the work when I hear you say doing you.
Exactly. You're right on, Dara. And I just want to say that there's an assumption that just because you are means you understand, right? And so because I have named myself as white, because I've named and owned that I'm multiracial, because I named Black, just because I name that to identify, doesn't mean I've done any work around what that means, right? And it is an ongoing journey. You don't do it overnight. You don't do it in a week. I still am doing race and how race shows up and matters in my life. And it's what I've been called to do in the work that I do every day and have done for more than nearly 4 decades. And there's still ways in which at the next round, at the next level, I get to see how I'm doing race. What does it mean to be doing race as a 60-year-old that's different than doing race as a 20-year-old? That's different than doing race as a 10-year-old, right? So how do we invite our children into doing race, right? And understanding that race is a thing, right? And while a social construct, it still matters, right? So we know this, the journey to, and as I think about my own journey, part of this doing race is understanding your own race narrative. What's in your head? What's your race narrative? When you think about race, who's in the room? So if I came into the room and I said, there's no people of color in here, but I look around and I see Latinx, I see Native Americans, I see Indigenous. It's like, so what do I mean when I say people of color? Right? So am I operating in a black and white binary narrative, and that's all I see when I talk about race, black and white, don't understand the nuance and the differences of folks who don't even identify racially because they've come to this place from different shores or are families of immigrants and so on, and they're more ethnically connected. So they don't have a racial, they don't in their bodies carry a racial identity, but in the context of the US, given our race history, they get raced, right? So I was talking to a number of immigrant Asians and South Americans and so on that don't identify in the race box,
Right.
but they get raced.
They get racialized,
right?
absolutely.
Exactly, they get racialized. And the understanding of what does it mean to be racialized as Asian in this culture,
America.
in this conversation. What does it mean to be? Because that's the space they're navigating.
Right.
Even if, you know, they don't carry it in their bodies. It's the thing that's put on them. I could be racial. I'd be racialized as Black, even if I wasn't from here.
Right.
Right. Engaging that conversation.
Like, so let me reset. We got folks. We got 5-6 folks who are here. Make yourself known. Let me know in the chat that you are here. This is amazing. We have the Reverend Dr. Jamie Washington. Feel free again to ask any questions in the chat. I am monitoring. This is the space that we create, right? That we can engage really hard topics. It's really important for us to do that work. What I hear is you kind of moving into that second piece of values. And I always say kind of our values really direct our behavior.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
Right. Hey, Sharice, how you doing? Okay, we got Sharice, we got Mike on here. I appreciate both families in Grand Valley. So going back to this values idea, values direct or values influence behavior. Mm-hmm. And so we have all these folks who are a part of organizations who have diversity missions, diversity value statements. They have the language and words, but it doesn't always translate into behavior, into the process. What do you say to folks who are like, I have all these values of inclusion, but then you walk into a room and then you don't notice racialized identities or racially minoritized identities in these spaces? What do you say to the folks who say that, but then still has growth and learning to do?
Well, so, you know, again, when we talk, so I value this, then how do I put this into practice, right? So the importance of really kind of seeing the value of engaging diversity through the lens of identities, right? So because there's lots of ways that we show up diverse in the world. You know, there's folks who do ice cream, folks who don't do ice cream, folks who are vanilla people, folks who are chunky monkey people, right? There are folks who, you know, can eat shellfish and those who are not. All of that's diverse. Right. All of that's diverse, right? So there's lots of diversity. You know, folk, night people, day people, you know, introvert, extrovert, all that's diverse. And it matters in the context of those folks and, you know, if you're fixing dinner and providing dessert. But as we talk about diversity in the context of social identities and the dynamics of historical exclusion and oppression, we begin to look at things like race, gender, class, ability, sexual orientation, nationality, first language, age, gender identity. Those things are ways in which folks who are either often included or not included, or the way is made smoother or not so smooth. So however, you know, one wants to frame that. And so if I say that I value all humanity and all people belonging, and I value what diversity brings to this situation, this learning space, this classroom, this religious space, this workspace, that the heterogeneous identities adds value to the space, helps us to be more able to fulfill our mission, then I have to pay attention to when the space is not reflective of that, right? So, and, you know, I recognize, even as I say this all the time, that a value of the presence of diversity has to be engaged even if there's not diversity present.
Ooh, say that one more time.
Right? So I often was so a value of the presence of diversity has to be engaged even if there's not a diversity present. So often I'm in spaces, it's like, well, we can't get no BIPOC folk to move here or to come here, or our class is largely this, or our department is largely this. And I say, I get that, because that's just real, right?
I mean, you can't,
Kind of demographically, you can't just invent, you just don't want to bring people in, to a place that, right, make them alone so we can say we got diversity, right? We ain't trying to do that. Lots of people trying to do that, but we ain't trying to do that. So what I'm saying is, so I'm in, and let's just say, I'm in an all white or a largely white space, right? Mm-hmm. How does that space reflect the value of racial diversity, even if there's not a lot of racial diversity in the room?
Right.
What are we reading? What are we talking about? How else are we bringing voices into the space? How are we inviting white folks to engage what they know about race from where they sit? That's a valuing of race as an identity worth engaging. That doesn't require, right? It's definitely going to be different if you got 20-30% of the folks in the room who have the lived minoritized racial experience, but you can't wait for that to have the conversation, to do the work. The same thing is true at an HSI. The same thing is true at an HBCU. And I think in some places we've not done as good a job as we could in those spaces, because we think, well, we all Black. We don't need to talk about. Well, yes, you do. You need to talk about how race matters and what that means and what's your race narrative, right? And how, in fact, do we show up complicit in replicating, doing harm to, how do we show up in anti-Blackness? How do we show up in anti-Asian stuff? How do we show up in the Black and brown, pitting one another against? How do we show up not seeing multiracial people as enough of anything, right? So all of that, when I talk about doing the race work and doing race, I'm talking about all of us needing to do race, right? And as minoritized persons, there's some different work that we get to do because we are impacted differently around, kind of this racial hierarchy, the racial oppression. But that doesn't mean we don't have anything to do, right? And white folks got a different kind of work to do, and they need to do race work, even if people of color ain't in the space.
And I'm gonna go to the chat because we got some really good stuff in the chat. I want to also acknowledge, like, what I'm hearing you is, like, say, in a racist society, the default is white supremacy. And so if you don't do any work, you are aligning yourself with tenets that are of white supremacist ideology, right? And so your silence continues to perpetuate the opportunity for white supremacy to gain momentum in spaces that you're in, when we are saying that, I only need to know about my identity. I only need to know about my group of people. I only need to think about how these racialized spaces are impacting people who look like me. And the reality of the situation is that we all been in that.
Yeah, that's
right. We are all in it.
That's right.
And we are all stuck in it. That's right. And we need all of us to get out of it. Very much so the work of Dr. King, right? That's right. Taylor Porter, amazing principal in Ohio, said, very good conversation. What are your thoughts on white backlash present day and historically? How do you build your stamina to keep pushing in the work?
Yeah. Taylor, thank you for that question, right? And that's an important question, particularly in the context where it feels, for some of us heightened right now, right? Mm-hmm. And so what I like to say is, it ain't the first time we've been in a context of resistance and backlash, right? And so, resilience has been a part of the work, is a part of the work of inclusion, a part of the work of honoring humanity, right? So we've been at that for a long time. And so this is our round of that, right? And so as we seek to shift the culture then to the next level. So, and I'm just gonna do in my lifetime for a moment. Okay. The seeking to, kind of tear down the barriers that had no Blacks need apply and whites and, coloreds only. And this, the work to do that, right? There was resistance to having Black and white and other BIPOC folks in the same space.
Right, physical space.
Right, in the same room, in the same classrooms, in the same restaurants, in the same hotels, all of that, right? And so the work of in that round was to shift that, right? And so some of that was done legally. Some of it was done, once the legal barriers had been kind of taken down, then we had to work experientially. People had to experience it, build the relationships and all that kind of stuff, right? But there was resistance to that. And some of that, from redlining to, schools, so who could get it, all of that stuff. And just because the laws were changed, that didn't mean attitudes change.
Absolutely.
Right? So
laws don't
we
change
changed
attitudes.
the laws. That's right. So we changed the laws, and now you can't keep people out. But then when you find out that you can't keep people out, then you find people like, why was we doing that? That didn't make sense. Why couldn't I have friends that way? Right. All right. So then attitudes begin to change, right?
Right.
So then you get more people, feeling like, why would we ever have done that? Doesn't make any sense. They're people, all right. And so today, what we're talking about as we move into this conversation and all of the work of the shoulders that we stand on is we're talking about now that having folks in the room, having diverse bodies in the space does not take away white supremacist culture.
Wait, say that one more time.
Just because you've got diversity in the room does not take away the culture, right? I can invite, so we want diversity in terms of style in my house. I invite a bunch of vegans to my house, but I only serve meat in the dining room. And that's all I've ever bought. That's all I ever served. So yes, it's a diverse room, but the culture still says carnivores are welcome. Eat the meat. And so just understanding that whole dynamic, that just because we've increased the numbers of diversity, that does do some stuff, because it positions people to see and experience and access and so on. It doesn't mean that we've shifted the culture of the space at all. And so where I have us at this round is looking at reframing and shifting the cultures, so that, because the cultures were set up for whites to move through, men to move through, heterosexuals to move through more smoothly, right? Right? So they were set up for that. And now we're saying, okay, yes, so we get that. And so now we want to expand that for all humanity. And so we've done some of the work in the legal ways to, now you can't keep people out, but we've invited them into a space that wasn't set up for them. Right? And so the work is, so now we got to expand. That's not saying we got to take meat off the menu, but we've got to have other options on the menu. We've also got to be able to understand that meat's not the only right and best thing to eat. Right. And so as the vegans show up, they got some stuff that those of us who are carnivores need to be learning from. Right. And maybe we'll be less carnivore-ish, right? I'm just using that as that food example. As we're talking here. So, so again, as we are inviting BIPOC and other folks of multiracial and Native and Indigenous folks into the space, we're not just inviting them in to fit in. We're inviting them in to expand and create a new way of being. Right. And that's the work for this round. So Taylor's question around how do you maintain, kind of your stamina in the face of backlash? First of all, you see backlash as good.
Conflict is necessary.
You see it as good. Why? Because no culture change has ever happened without resistance. And so if you ain't getting no resistance, you ain't doing much change.
Ooh. Okay.
like they just pacifying you. It's like, oh yeah, we can get him a little bit of that. We get him a little bit of that, but they ain't changing nothing.
Yep.
It is when you actually look where it looks like you changing hearts, you changing minds, you changing policies, you changing practices, you changing narratives. It's like, oh, we got to push back against that because you're trying to be in a whole different way. So first, see it as good. Second, recognize the work didn't start with you and it won't end with you. So it is arrogant of us to assume that we are going to change all of this in the space and time. We are going to do our part to move the needle. right? But we might not see the change that we're fighting for.
Mm.
So I say that to say you have to breathe. And you
Right.
have to be in community with others. Yes.
Trying
Yes,
to be
right?
the savior, right? Because that's
That's right.
steeped in supremacy.
That's right. It's
Yeah.
steeped in supremacy. I know better. I know this is the way it's supposed to be, and so on. And I'm not saying stop the fight. I'm not saying stop the righteous positioning of our humanity and dismantling of racism and sexism and all. I'm not saying that. What I am saying is recognize that you are engaging other humanity, and that the folks who are resisting for a reason.
Right.
They believe what you are saying is going to change something they value.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so it's important for us to understand what's their investment in staying in status quo.
Yep.
Right. What's the investment in that? And so
and can I even expound on that?
Yeah.
Because what they're really trying to protect is all the people, things that have invested in their success.
That's right. That's right.
And it's like, now you're not just when you tell me that I'm this or that, you're not just telling me that right? That you're not talking about my friends, my family, my children.
What about my son? What about my children? What about my grandchildren? All of that. That's right.
And people I don't know about you, but I just got to a point where my wife can be like, get it together. And I'm like, all right. It's been 10 years, right? And I just got to that point where I'm like, I'll do better. But most likely people are getting defensive. People are shutting down. People are not feeling heard. People are feeling unsafe. People are feeling fear. Most of the time made up in their heads. But just because it's made up in their head doesn't mean it doesn't feel real.
That's right.
Right?
That's right.
And the feeling is oftentimes, again, another thing that influences their behavior. And so they're feeling shame, guilt, and then they shut down, they get defensive.
Absolutely. That's right. Very much so.
What would be the last thing, because I feel like I jumped in too early, but
you're fine.
That would give folks stamina, right? The resilience journey. And before I do that, I want to acknowledge folks in the chat and amazing folk from the UK, right? Amazing. Breathe You family showed up. She said, that's good. A value of the presence of diversity has not been reviewed, has to be reviewed, even if diversity is not present. Woo! That was a word. I'm gonna be that was that one might go on a graphic. Okay.
That's all right. That's all right. That's all right.
Oftentimes I think about, because I get this a lot with younger professionals my age, even they feel like they are being marginalized by supervisors, people in higher positions, and it's like I have to take this abuse to move up in a field that I care about. And I even have a hard time helping them navigate that, because that is a delicate balance, right?
It is a delicate balance.
On one side, I believe people are with us on purpose, right? People are in spaces intentionally, and it will be hard for me to tell a person, don't go after your dream because one racist person is in front of your way. But I also have this same orientation, like thinking about, like Dr. Jordan West talked about how you should leave tables that's no longer serving you. And so how do we help some of these young folks who are next in the work to find that stamina, right? Through all of this, right? A lot of stuff that they got to think through, right? And feel.
Well, it is, we're all in this space of deep self-reflection and examination around what matters to me, right? And what's my investment? And so I always say, so if someplace is really doing you harm, and I'm not talking about making you uncomfortable. See, I think lots of folks have confused the doing of harm with making them uncomfortable, right? You know, if you're going to work with human beings in real ways, you're going to have some uncomfortable moments. So this myth around that's another part of white supremacy, right? And dominant culture. I'm not supposed to be uncomfortable. That's some bullshit. I'm sorry. Right. So we need to help folks. I'm not talking about you have to always be uncomfortable. We got to live in constant discomfort. That's not what I'm saying. Don't hear that. But I am saying that part of the human experience is having uncomfortable moments. And so how do you build resiliency to be in a, now, if it's sucking your soul, if it's a toxic environment, if you're sick every night when you go home, right? If you are having ulcers, if you know those kinds of things, if you are self-medicating with food, shopping, religion, exercise, all of those things can be ways of self-medicating to the extreme. I'm not talking about self-care and taking care of yourself, but I'm talking about to the extreme so that you don't have to feel anything.
Are you running from it?
Right. Then maybe it is time for you to plan your exit strategy. Maybe you have done all you can do there. Mm-hmm. But again, as I think about preparing the next generation, that I want to prepare the next generation to recognize that part of the journey of creating systemic and cultural change is that discomfort is going to be there. Mm. Now, how am I in discomfort? Do I allow the discomfort to have me instead of me having it? Mm. Right? Okay, so this doesn't feel good, but this too shall pass. It is not my whole definition. I don't so I have a life beyond this. Again, that's what that whole notion of kind of the arrogance. So recognizing it didn't start with you, so it's not going to end with you. So this is your part for this round to navigate. So yes, I've got a manager or a supervisor that's, I just wish they would show up a little bit differently, right? Okay, that's my part to carry. And so, so I navigate with that as long it's not again, it's not sucking my soul. It's not, because I still feel like I get to do the work that I value and that I care about. I've been working with the framework and the concept of circle of concern and circle of influence. Circle of concern and circle of influence and control. And so many of us in the DEI work spend our energies, in this whole notion of the circle of concern. Racism, systemic racism is so big. We need to change these institutions, cultures. We don't have enough faculty staff. We're in all these things that are a concern. And those are very real things. Very. But if you spend all of your energy there, you do nothing in your circle of concern, circle of control, and circle of influence. Mm-hmm. My circle of control is the spaces that I get to do something about. Right. So if I actually get to be the hiring authority, I get to do something about that. And so if I'm on a search committee, I get to influence what happens in that space. I get to recommend people to apply. So I'm influencing the candidate pool and so on, right? Such that then the circle of concern gets smaller. So the concern isn't as big because I work the control, I work the influence, so that there's less of a concern in that way. But if I just get in this circle of concern and just spin around, what's bigger than I as a one person can do, then nothing changes. Right. Nothing at all changes. So all of those things are there. And the other piece is, as I said, it didn't start with you, it won't end with you. So don't take yourself so seriously. I mean, yes, it matters. But when the last time you laughed, right? It's, I tell folks all the time, just because I'm trying to change the world doesn't mean I have to be miserable, right? I don't have to be living doom and gloom. This diversity, equity, and inclusion work is my purpose, and I celebrate the opportunities to engage hearts and mind and energies and systems and be with people who are in that space. So you have to find community with folks. You have to find the joy. You have to remember your passion. Why does this matter to me at all? And allow yourself joy and liberation, joy and liberation. And if you don't got none of that in your life, then that's probably the problem.
Two things to add to that. So shout out to, we got Mr. Emotion, Mr. Minrod in Motion, Neil. Appreciate you from the BU family again, and for those, I appreciate these folks listening in and hearing just from shoulders that I have stood on, right? Strong shoulders that I have stood on. We are here again with the Reverend Dr. Jamie Washington, just talking race, leadership, right? Being better humans. And what I'm hearing is you talk about it's hard work because it's hard work.
That's right.
And I'm gonna say that one more time for folks, right? Like diversity, equity, inclusion, it's hard work because it's hard work. So I have been taught to celebrate being able to get the opportunity to speak in front of 1 or 1,000 when doing this work. And I never try to tell them that I'm guaranteeing them safety. But I'm asking them, right? Because I can't guarantee safety to my 7-year-old son that goes to school every day. His teachers can't guarantee safety. His principals can't guarantee safety. Yeah, he has to be brave enough to go to school, even in the midst of school shootings at as early as elementary schools, right?
That's right.
Our organizational leaders, we need to be brave enough to do hard work, which means you can't policy the change. You can't politicize the change. You can't force the change. You gotta feel first.
That's right.
I think this is why I always have a hard time with the one-offs with organization leaders who want way more than what you are really able to provide and able to gather, right?
In 90 minutes in a virtual space.
If I say, what's the feeling that you get when you have to engage race in the organization, and 90% of people say anxious, nervous, afraid, decentered, all these
pessimistic, here we go again. Yeah. Numb, right? Yeah.
That is a body of work that needs to be done first. Because if you can't feel what will be good or bad, you can't write a policy that will be good.
That's right.
You can't write a policy that's good at all when you don't know what the feeling is behind it.
That's right.
And,
absolutely right.
We're not talking about managing machines. We're talking about managing people with histories, with backgrounds, with ideologies, with perspectives that are valued and that are valid in many ways, but also could be misinformed. And so doing the hard work helps you build your circle of influence.
That's right.
The bigger the circle of influence, the better it is to work through those other circles.
That's right.
Right? If I don't know your concern for me, if you don't have any influence over me, your concern for me really might not matter. Right? If you can't influence me, the control you have over me really might not matter as much either. I'm not going to go as hard as I can. Even if you supervise me, it's because you can't influence me. You're not leading me. You're telling me what to do. Right? That work is hard to do in diversity, equity, and inclusion. To just manage it. Right? You can't control what people feel.
That's right. You cannot.
And so I get into a person. I serve. I will always show up, right? Especially any opportunity to get to share this word. I don't care if it's 60 minutes, 90 minutes. I'm going to do my best. But you also can't expect to then have 30 people in a space, all these feelings all over the place, and then in 60 minutes, we have all extinguished the feeling.
Right.
Right.
No, exactly. And then, you know, what I'm experiencing in a lot of spaces, and again, shout out to the University of Minnesota undergraduate education, a diversity advisory council that has just, gotten formed, but the leadership in Professor, my buddy Alexander Hines, had the wisdom that I'm working with so many leaders around, and I know you know this, Dar, that everybody's got a diversity council, commission, advisory committee, work group, presidents, so that's what we got. And that is an important piece for moving the culture. But what they do is they bring them together, sometimes with flim flam, no thought out charges, and sometimes with really pretty well thought out charges. But all of the charges are focused on doing.
Yep.
The council, the commission, the working group is going to do this. It's going to produce this, and so on and so forth. And so we don't even pay attention to how the council gets formed, right? We often just put on the council the minoritized people, right? Or so folks are on by role and position or by identity, right? And okay, so we got that group. But now just do this. No. They've got to be. They got to do them first, right? Before they can get into doing these things that you're saying that they're supposed to do. And so many of these kinds of bodies fail because they don't do the development and capacity building work that they need so that they can then get into the work of transformation of the institution or organization. So we're spending a good bit of time creating the container. So the value of doing the work so that people can get to head and heart what they feel as they're navigating this, what this looks like for them every day, not just at the committee meeting, is critical setup work for success. It's like building anything that organization or team of human beings, but particularly those who are charged with doing this work to lead the institution. You have to recognize that I showed up, I got invited to this community because I'm the professor in Africana Studies, or I advise the BSU, or I the director or coordinator of LGBT. And that don't mean I've done no work around nothing else.
None.
And so I show up in the room and I'm single focused, right? All it's like, well, what I got to do with Black people? What I got to do with wait, okay. That's a piece of the work, but how are you showing up, continuing to be in ways that support white supremacy or the divided horizontal hostility? All of that stuff requires work and ongoing work with the group around development, not just, okay, we did this for the first 2 meetings and now let's just get into the work, because what's going to happen is all the stuff going to show up and you're trying to do the work, right? And so we have to continue to be in a developmental capacity building process, and you have to build that in to the life of the committee and the work that is being done, or else you're going to struggle.
To put simply, right? You can't do race work with people who don't have conversations about race openly, authentically, honestly, right? You got a committee of people who are afraid to say race in front of each other, but are expected to change the organization's racial context.
Duh. Can't we see how that's problematic?
and then,
but that's happening everywhere. That's happening all over the place.
Yep. And we've taken it to the next level by saying, and if you don't have those abilities to do it with the small group, how you going to do it with the large group? How? Wow. Okay. It's been 50 minutes already. And we are navigating increasing numbers, right? Still, this is why I always invite the Reverend Dr. James Washington, because he is a fan favorite. Right? He has fans. I don't know. It's not, I'm a fan, right? And then I'm connected with people who are fans. And so it just works for
You're right,
me.
exactly. And that's why, so for me, it's not a, you send me a note saying, can we do this? Yes, when we doing it? Because I'm a fan, right? And again, it's so honoring. And I've said this before that, again, as I said, I know I stand on incredible shoulders. And so I honor the folks who made it possible for me to be in this space, to be in this conversation, the Joan Lesters and Carol Johnsons, right? Those folks, the Bailey Jacksons, right? And the Rita Hardimans and, Elsie White Cross Associates, so equity is those folks who have been in the work that, provided the foundation for me. And so I recognized that I didn't get here on my own and I couldn't do the work. The Donna Barras is just so many, that I'm just honoring, but I also honor the next generation of brilliance, right? So I know that when I'm sitting in a room with a Dara Merriweather or Carmen Rivera or Becky Martinez, Alejandro or Darrell Brooks or Dominic Rollins, I know that those are the folks who are going to carry on the work.
Yeah.
Right? Because, we, in this conversation, we clear. We ain't gonna finish this. Like this ain't like this is we're gonna be at this for a minute. And there is wisdom and there's insight and there is knowledge and there is imagination based on your experiences that you will need to bring in to the next round that builds on the work that we all have done at SJTI and Encore and all of those kinds of spaces, that white privilege, and all those spaces. So I think this work is most effective when it is intergenerational and cross-generational, and that there's an honoring and respect of how far we've come and how far we need to go. Right. And so I was on with Vice President Dr. Lucretia Flash from the College of Berkeley, Berkeley College of Music, Conservatory of Music, and we were just kind of talking about this whole notion of not getting caught up in either or. So if I just live in all of the how far we need to go, then I dishonor and disrespect the work and the labor of those who brought us to this place. Right? Likewise, if I get caught up in just how far we've come, then I dishonor the work and the experiences of all those who see we ain't finished. Right? Thank you for that work. That has mattered. Right. And do you know that Black and brown bodies are still, mortality rates, killings, access, it's still, we ain't finished.
Right.
We've done work, right? We have done some good stuff, and you have been at the forefront of doing some of that good work. We're not dishonoring that, but we must not dishonor that. At the same time, we must recognize, okay, so what's the next round? What's the next round of liberation? What's the next round of freedom? What's the next round of transformation? So that we all feel that our humanity is valued, right? And so that's the thing, right?
And before I even, just shameless plug before I let you kind of give us some last words or whatever is kind of on your heart. I believe the next wave is a lot of these folks who are watching, who are listening, who are in his, right? Sharing this live. If you got something from it, our work is going to be immensely digital at doing the good work, right? We are in an age where social media is used for fun, and at Mayweather Consulting, right? What we use social media for is to educate and engage in this work. And so we are creating these spaces and we want more people to join us and tell people about the community, tell people about the work that we're doing, tell people about me, right? About you. That's the round that we are in right now. We need more shares. We need to share this work just as much as we are sharing the funny meme. I like funny memes.
That's right. Me too, all day.
I love them. Right?
That's right.
And I also love justice.
That's right.
Right. And I don't think that they don't have to be mutually exclusive.
They don't have to be mutually exclusive. They do not.
So what's on your heart, right? As we wrap this thing up, as we close this thing down, what would you like to share with folks who are listening or watching the replay?
Celebrate Black excellence, Black joy, and Black love. Celebrate it. Just be in it. Just immerse yourself in it. The people in your life of African descent, Black folks, just celebrate their brilliance, name the brilliance, be in the joy, and honor the love, particularly in this contextual moment. We just, yesterday was 2222, right? And that the significance of that number is about bringing balance, and it's an angel number that represents and symbolizes kind of this bringing of balance and harmony into our lives. And that's what I wish for folks of African descent, that they bring some balance and harmony into their lives. So joy, brilliance, love, and that it's not all the pain, not just the pain of our experience, but we bring some balance into that. And as I say that and honor the lives of Black people, I want us grounded in this notion that all lives can't matter until Black lives matter. Right. And so there has to be a grounding in when we say all lives matter, we have to hold that means Black lives matter. Right. And because we're not at a space yet where that feels like the reality, that we have to keep reminding us as well as others that Black lives matter. And I am confident and comfortable quite unapologetically to name that and know that and hope that folks can hear that I'm not saying that Black lives are the only lives that matter. That was not the statement, but it is that we must do the work, given our historical context of our lives not mattering. And I mean all of our lives at all of the intersections of trans and queer and disabled and old and young and homeless and adopted and light skin and dark skin, all of the Blackness matters. And that's what I want us to celebrate as we start this Black History Month.
Oh, standing ovation. Standing ovation. Listen, can you tell folks where they can find you, how they can connect with you?
You can find me, if you can see that emblem back there, it's WCG, Washington Consulting Group.net. You just go right there if you want to reach out, if you want to connect, you can find me in that way. I am YouTubeable and Googleable. So again, as my friend names here, social media. But if you want to connect, please reach out, and I'm going to continue doing good work, doing it consciously, doing mindfully, doing intentionally better.
Yes. Hey, for all the folks who are in this space, when I tell you how I got this relationship is because I reached out to Black excellence. I saw it, I wanted it, I aspired to be around it. I asked, how can I serve, to learn more from the amazing Reverend Dr. Jamie Washington. Thank you all for being with us. We are wrapping this one up.
Love to my mama and my daddy and my grandmama, my granddaddy and my grandchildren coming behind, my wonderful partner, Sam, all of it. Just grateful. Thank you to you, Stephanie, to the boys, Jackson, Justin. Love, 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 love. All of it.